Wonderful, thank you. Glad to be here, everyone. I see some familiar faces, and as some of you may know, I lived in Pittsburgh for the last 5 years, and as Julie and I were briefly talking about, she couldn't remember that I was in the DC area. She was thinking I was still in Pittsburgh, and I was telling her that some days I also feel like I'm waking up in Pittsburgh. What I wanted to say, I'm going to share my screen here. If you can see this, give me a thumbs up in the camera. Amazing. So what I want to do, just to start, is reiterate that my teaching style is very discussion oriented. I don't presume to own all the truth, and so I look forward to your input, whether that's by chat or by using the raised hand function, which you can find under reactions. And so I'm going to strongly encourage you to share what you have to say. I certainly want to hear it. So please do that. So I want to begin by sharing, asking this question. What is your favorite moment when two characters, maybe in TV or in movies, when two characters first meet each other? Two examples I was thinking of was my wife was recently watching Sleepless in Seattle. Right, when these two characters are meeting for the first time, and it's like very dramatic. And I was also thinking about when Luke Skywalker met Darth Vader for the first time. Slightly less romantic, certainly just as dramatic. What are some moments for you that are some favorite moments when two characters meet? You can put them in the chat. If you want to raise your hand so we can unmute you, just what's a moment when two characters meet for the first time that you like as a favorite, something that resonates with you? Yeah, Esther Westelman. Hold on, we can't hear you yet.
I remember an interview on TV between the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and Rabbi Soloveitchik. And the dynamic between the two of them was unbelievable.
Amazing. Definitely not on the romantic side, but I can imagine very dramatic. Thank you, Esther. Right, I saw Fanny Brice and Nick Arnston in Funny Girl. Right, Ron, Hermione in Harry Potter. Right? So these are the kind of moments I'm thinking about, these moments in which two characters either meet each other for the first time or sort of encounter each other in a way that reveals something. I could see Oscar and Felix in The Odd Couple, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs and Sir Richard Dawkins was another one, President Biden and the Pope. These are very good moments when two people have encountered each other for the first time. Well, what I want to do is I want to share with you a little bit of what we're going to do today. I'm going to share a little bit of text from Parashat Chayei Sarah, which has very special meaning to me. And then we're going to have a bit of a discussion and reflection together, and then I'm going to share a short story about why this is so meaningful for me. I see Jacob and Esau, where it was mentioned here in the chat by Carrie. Debbie said when two characters meet for the second time, they have a history from long ago, many years past, and they re-meet. Ooh, that one's good. I like that a lot. What I want to share to start off with is that yesterday was my wedding anniversary. My wife and I have been married for 3 years. And part of the Torah we want to share at Chayei Sarah is Torah that my wife and I shared at our shared tish. So we had a tish together, and we led it together. And this is a picture of us from that day. Thank you very much. We studied the parsha together in advance of the wedding, and we focused our energies on these verses, mostly the first two, but also all three. Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arev v'yisa einav v'yar v'hine gemalim ba'im. And Isaac went out walking, because you have italicized it, maybe it's not so walking. He was walking in the field, toward evening, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, behold, camels were approaching. And then the second verse. V'yisa Rivka et enea v'teireh et Yitzchak v'tipol me'al hagamal. And Rebecca lifted up her eyes, using this very much the same language, and she saw Isaac, and she fell from the camel. And I'll skip the third verse for the moment, since we're not really talking about it today. I want to start off by talking about this word, lasuach, which I've translated here as walking. It's a really strange word. Now, the commentators say a variety of different things. Ibn Ezra, who is primarily focused in grammar, that's the way he approaches his commentaries, interpretations. He says, lasuach, lalechet ben hasichim, that lasuach refers to walking amidst the bushes and the shrubs. Now, we see this in other places, in particular with the second story of creation, right? So we have these two stories of creation in Genesis. The first one is the 7 days of creation, and the second one is sort of the creation story all squished together in the second chapter. And here we talk about, in that parsha, in that portion of the Torah, it uses the word siach as as example of all the shrubs that had yet to grow because the rains hadn't come to encourage them to grow. So we have this word that means walking amidst the bushes and the shrubs. That's where Ibn Ezra is drawing it from. Now, Rashi has a different take. Rashi says, lasuach, lashon tefillah. This is the language of tefillah. Kamo yishpoch sicho. Like when someone is pouring out their heart or pouring out their conversation, right? The word siach can also mean conversation. And so we have this weird word that means multiple things, lasuach. And in this case, according to Rashi, it means that he's like pouring out his heart. It's tefillah, it's meditation. And so I want you just to imagine for a moment where Isaac is, sort of mentally. He is, his mother has just died. His father previously had tried to kill him. And he's out in the fields, and he is lasuach. He's out there in the woods, he's out there praying, meditating. And so I want to ask you, what do you think in that context is what he's praying or meditating for? So I'm going to encourage you to raise your hand, use the raised hand function. You can wave vigorously in front of the camera as another way, but less guaranteed. Carrie Hildebrand, is that a thumbs up or a raised hand? A raised hand, awesome.
Raised hand, yeah. But I think lasuach in contemporary, it's not usually used in contemporary Hebrew, but usually means like to stroll. Excuse me. And I think what it is we have a traumatized Isaac here, that rather than working in the fields or doing something constructive, he's just strolling aimlessly.
I want to draw on that word he's right, aimlessly. Right? He's not necessarily doing something specific. He is existing, right? He's just being present, perhaps.
Right.
I like that. Thank you, Carrie. Joy, I'm going to say your last name wrong. I'm so sorry. Gonsi is the first 5 letters. I'm not going to butcher your name, but when you get unmuted, definitely say your last name so that I can say it right the next time. Julie, do you see her there?
Here we go. Gonzarowski, but just call me Joy. I think in terms of praying or meditating, peace of mind. Like you said, I mean, he was traumatized as a youngster, and now he's traumatized again, I'm sure, with the death of his mother, who was, someone who cared for him immensely, obviously.
Awesome. Thank you, Joy. I'm also not going to necessarily say your name right. B Mia or By Mia.
Hi, it's Bamaya, like papaya or haya.
Got it. Thank you.
I think that he was kind of praying in nature, reminds me of how we hear about the Hasidim, and just sort of I don't know. I imagine that it doesn't seem aimless, but maybe his life was without direction or meaning, and he was sort of praying to find that. Like, what am I even doing with my life right now? You know, like, I don't know where I'm headed in the aimless. And then, ta-da! I like the fell off the camel. It's rich.
Yeah, we're getting to that one next, so no spoilers. But I love this image, right? That the Hasidim, who of much later, in the example of the Baal Shem Tov, who find a connection with the divine out in nature, right? That they are not necessarily aimless, but present, right, in connection with what's happening around them. Annette Lipworth.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. The Hebrew to speak to someone is lesocheach, and it is the same root, I presume. But my question is to myself, if lesuach would be you speak to yourself, or lesocheach is to speak to someone else. So if he's wondering there, is he talking to himself or is he talking to God? Is there conversation there with someone else or with himself only?
That's a great question. One I don't think there's a good answer, a clear answer to, right? Rashi would certainly draw on the idea that he is talking to God, right? That he's in this sort of self-reflective, Lehit Palel mode, and in relationship and connection with the divine. Esther Westelman. Hold on one sec. Let's get you unmuted.
Okay. We have to remember that we don't hear from Yitzchak anymore. Yitzchak is silent throughout the rest of the Torah. So we have to understand his position at the time. He is almost at the Akedah, which is a traumatic thing. His mother dies, and so he's overwhelmed. And I think the only place that he can find some solace is in nature. And so that's where that's the experience that he is going through, which is very understandable because we don't hear from him again.
Yeah. We there is a sense of real silence that comes from him. And here, sort of dafka, right? We're using words around speaking, that there's an interesting overplay there. It makes me think also, I don't know enough about Japanese to speak on this, but there is a word for like a nature bath, right? That being out in nature is sort of healing and cleansing, and perhaps he was experiencing something along those lines. And I like what Karen Fitzgerald said in the chat, right? Walking meditation, right? Praying for guidance and support and direction from God. I think, or in addition, perhaps correcting my translation, forest bathing, right? That he is somehow, if we combine Ibn Ezra and Rashi together, he's out there doing some sort of self-reflective act. That he is thinking about his experience, perhaps what his wants, desires, his challenges are. Let's move on a little bit. We look back at this verse, and we look now at Rebecca. And what we see with the story of Rebecca is, as Bamia said before, right? V'tipol me'al hagamal. She fell from the camel. Now I'm going to tell you, when my wife and I first read this, we read Ibn Ezra first, right? We had just read him before. We're reading him again, and he says the reason v'tipol me'al hagamal, that she fell from on top of the camel, b'ritzona kamovi yipol al panav. Right, that she did so sort of out of her own desire, that she did so willingly. She sort of fell herself off of the camel in order to fall on her face, which is language the Torah uses when someone is sort of bowing down. Right, those are the words that Abraham and Moses use when they're talking to God, that they fall on their face. I have to tell you, when my wife Ilana and I first read this, that didn't work for us, right? We didn't like this idea that Rebecca was showing up to this person she had never met, right? She looks up, sees this person, and then jumps off her camel in some sort of bowing type of way, that as sort of a modern couple, that didn't work for us. Sort of not the egalitarian world that we wanted to live in. And so we sat with trying to figure out how to deal with this. And we later got learned a little bit from Rashbam, which also is really sort of very interesting framing. He says, "V'tipol me'al gamal," that she fell off from upon the camel. Litzniut, we in a translated here sort of in a respectful way, right? With modesty. Lefi shehayita rochevet kamo ish, that she was riding the camel like a man, which again, not particularly fond of the Rashbam's framing here, but the idea was that she was riding it with legs on both sides of the camel and not sideways. Right? The idea is if you were riding it sideways, you'd be doing it in sort of, according to this way of thinking, a feminine way, one I'm not necessarily ascribing to, but that she was riding it as most people write it. And he Rashbam explains, Mishum bi'uta de gamala de kidimifaresh b'psachim, right? That this was because of the fear of the camel, or the camel's fear, as explained in Psachim, which was to say that it was perhaps dangerous, and that this was a safer way to holding the camel, of riding it. Which is to say, for us, as we were reading this together, what the Rashbam was teaching us was less about her sort of showing up in a way that was deferential to her husband-to-be, this person she had never even really spoken to yet, but in a way that was graceful, that way that was confident. We imagined her that she sort of slid off of the camel and sort of stood beside him. There's another commentator who says that the goal was for her to come off the camel so that she could stand, face to face, sort of standing in equal stature. This is a very different framing of this moment that they met together, and I can see Bamia, right, saying this is rom-com fodder. And if you click the link to the source sheet, I named this meditations and meet cutes, right? Like, this is how I imagine the two of them encounter each other for the first time, right? In the movie business, right, the moment when characters first meet is the meet cute, right? It's the time where somebody drops something and they pick it up and they look into each other's eyes for the first time. And so I think part of what we're seeing here, part of what I think we're seeing here, is this moment in which these two individuals are showing up in a particular way, and I think a way that precedes the moment itself, right? That they have a temperament, they have a way of being, and they're encountering each other for the first time and showing off who they are. They're presenting themselves as they are. Before I share sort of my takeaway, I'd love to hear what people think. What do people feel? I'll turn off the screen share for a moment. What do people feel about this moment? What do you think? Now that we have a sense of what Isaac perhaps was thinking and praying for, we have Rebecca showing up, coming off of the camel. What do we think is happening in their minds? They both raise up their eyes, they see each other. What do you think is happening to them? What do you think they're thinking about? Yeah, Annette.
I think she fell in love, literally fell. And I think that she didn't know who he was. She only saw him. It was his looks that she liked very much. And that's what happened.
Right, there are commentators who say that he was she was struck by his beauty and fell off the camel, face first, as it were, in love with him. Absolutely. What else? Right, I see here, right, alighted is not really fell, which is a translation that shows up. I'm not sure what alighted means in English, truthfully. What do other folks think? Yeah, Carrie Hillebrand, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we Paul in Hebrew is to fall, and if she was on a camel. First of all, it wouldn't be riding a camel is not like riding a horse. It's extremely unstable, and you wouldn't ride side saddle as in Victorian times. A woman would have ridden a horse. You'd simply fall off the camel and probably break your neck. I think Paul, and also to get off a camel, especially for a woman a young woman at this time, someone would have to come and assist her and make the camel kneel down and then help her off, as you may have seen in movies. That's the way it was done. Otherwise, she'd be literally falling if she was doing it by her own. She'd be up high on an unstable hump. So I think we have to take the Hebrew literally here. She lost her balance and she fell.
Okay, great. Wendy.
Hi. I was wondering whether there might be a less romantic interpretation, in that maybe there was a convention that women were not supposed to be physically higher than the men that they were marrying, and so she needed to lower herself as quickly as possible so that she would be physically lower than Isaac. It's just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly a very possible read, right? Which is the Torah is speaking often in male voices in a context in which there really wasn't really an egalitarian world in any way, shape, or form. And so if we read sort of in the context of the Torah and its speaking of itself, I think that's very possible, right? That she might be safer to not be on a camel with this person approaching. I try not to read the Torah that way, me personally, but I think that's a totally reasonable read of what the text is saying. Absolutely. Jennifer Nech Houston. Sorry for butchering everybody's name.
Okay, I think I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I like to follow along when I'm studying Torah with Robert Alter. And so he uses elided also. And I just can't help it that with everything we've read so far, she's not falling off that camel. She alights from it. And when they get off of the camels, it seems to me I read like in a Nietzsche novel called Caravans. But anyway, you had ropes, and when you got down off the camel, you didn't jump from its back to the ground. You grabbed the rope and you would literally like swing, and kind of lightly land on the ground. So I only know that from that book I read many years ago called Caravans. But either way, also Walter says he was strolling in the field, and I think someone mentioned that interpretation also. And so anyway, it's like we hear all the interpretations and then we pick the one that sits well with our mind. So she alighted from that camel.
That's great. Thank you, Jennifer. I don't know your name, but it says iPhone and then your phone number.
iPhone 929, there you go.
Yeah, go for it. You're unmuted, so if you want to share your thought, now's a good time.
Maybe it's in her.
All right, Deborah, please.
Maybe this was a sign of respect in those times. I think it would be nice if people would do that nowadays. I think it would make for more peace in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we broaden the definition of tzniut here, as I've defined it as sort of a respectful way, the way we encounter one another makes a big difference. And I'm going to share my screen again here. And so if I sort of summarize some of the things that I was thinking about this, and I'll admit perhaps a little bit more broadly defined than a super close reading of the text. My sense is sort of the imagined moment that I have in my mind is one in which we have Isaac self-reflecting. He's out in the woods and he's bringing this energy of being thoughtful and reflective and meditative. And on the other hand, reading in a perhaps a more in a way that where Rebecca is his equal, imagining her as confident and graceful and heart-filled, showing up to this moment. And we have these two, if we imagine them as concepts, these two concepts showing up. And it makes me think about the ways we show up when we encounter other people. Not just romantic partners, but also the way we encounter people in first impressions, or as we heard somewhere earlier in the chat, a second impressions, the second time we encounter someone, or the ways that we are in relationship with friends and family, people who we love and love us. And I think that the way we show up to something, the way that we can bring our best selves, right? If we imagine that they are bringing the best person they could be in this first encounter, that they both become, we have the potential to become the best people we can be, right? That bringing these qualities of reflection, of confidence, of whatever it is that you bring, that is part of your temperament, the positive descriptions of who you are, to show up in a way that builds partnership and friendships, helps you grow and improve. And I want to share this by way of story, which is, as you know, I said earlier that it was it's my anniversary. We got married 3 years ago. We lived in Pittsburgh. While we got married in Los Angeles, our wedding was the same weekend as the shooting that we commemorated earlier this week, which touched us very deeply, which impacted us very, very seriously. You can see, despite the tragedy, we found many ways to live in joy, and to hold joy and sorrow together. And Rabbi Cheryl Peretz, who's in the background here, one of our two officiants, along with Rabbi Sheldon Pennis, shared with us a piece of Torah that helped us through that time and sort of gave us an opportunity to live out this encounter, I think, between Isaac and Rebecca, which is she taught us in the Gemara, this text of when a funeral procession and a wedding procession encounter each other, that we show up, we give precedence to the wedding. And for us, this was a real gift for us to show up and be pleasant and joyous and happy on our wedding, and sort of live with this joy and sorrow. And so when we did return a few days later to Pittsburgh, we found out that I would be the only rabbi on staff at the Congregation Beth Shalom, the major conservative synagogue in Squirrel Hill. And it was the place where all of the other congregations were gathering in the days after the shooting. And what I discovered, the first Shabbat had 1,000 people. It was the 3 plus us congregations together, and people who from all over the community. But the reason why I'm sharing this, the reason why this parsha feels so important to me, and that's just the end, so I'll stop sharing. The reason why this parsha and the way this story shows up is I got a chance to live it out. Like, even though I knew my wife and it wasn't our first encounter, I got a chance to see who she was, and the way that we got a chance to see who Rebecca was, the way we got a chance to see who Isaac was, the support she showed me, and the way that she helped me be a better person, and the way that I think we can learn from Isaac and Rebecca, the way we can show up and engage one another to be our best selves, the way that Isaac and Rebecca showed up. And so I sort of want to only conclude, which is to wish my beautiful wife happy anniversary, who's of course not here today. She's at work, being the person that she is. But to just hold this moment, this encounter, where two people, romantic partners, friends, family, however two people show up to be the best people that they can be, to be encouraging of one another, because I like the idea that Isaac and Rebecca were bringing these qualities not only into the moment that they met, but throughout the relationship they had. These two people are the real beginners of the Jewish people, if we really think about it. That it was Rebecca's putting together the pieces to make sure that the Jewish people would continue with Jacob and Esau afterwards. And so for me, I resonate very deeply with this story, and this was part of the Torah that Ilana and I shared at our wedding. I'll open it up for people who want to share any more if something resonates with you, and I'll sort of only conclude by way of saying how grateful I am that all of you are here and that we got a chance to share some Torah together. I see that Jennifer, you have your hand up, and if anyone else has anything else they want to add, to share that as well.
Oh, thank you, and of course, happy anniversary, and Mazel Tov. And I'm sure I say that on behalf of everyone. Thanks for taking the time to teach us today. I learned so much. I wanted to say, yes, that power of there's showing up how, in a way, we complete each other. And the idea that, and I'll end with this, that certain prayers are more, they're more able to reach God in community. I know I read that in our daily daf, actually, but yeah, God. So I'll stop with that. But the idea of community facilitating prayer and allowing it to be heard and to resonate.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Esther Westelman. Esther, we can't hear you yet. You have to take the unmute that Julie. There you go.
I can't resist telling a little story that I read from a sofer in Jerusalem by the name of Yeshayahu Leibovich that really parallels the parasha. He talks about this child who asked this piano teacher who only taught gifted children to teach him how to play the piano. And at first she refused, but he says, I really want my mother to hear me. And he comes for a few lessons and stops. And then she has a recital and he begs permission to participate. And he plays beautifully. And she says, I don't understand. He says, my mother was deaf, but she died a week ago. And I know now she can hear me. So I'm thinking the story of Chayei Sarah, we talk about her after she died. And so he wanted to play the piano after his mother died. I just couldn't resist this correlation of the story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Esther. Anyone else have any last thoughts? Again, not knowing your name, iPhone 929. Julie will unmute you if you have something you want to add.
iPhone 929-436. I know. I think it's an error.
Okay. Carrie Hillebrand. And then Karen Fitzgerald, I see you afterwards.
Yeah, I think actually we have to take romance out of this equation here. There's nothing romantic here. This is, as was common at the time, it was purely a pragmatic transaction. Abraham's servants brought all the gold and goodies, and Laban saw all that and said, "Ka-ching," and agreed to the union. And then Isaac just said, "This is your bride." Oh, okay, and went along and brought him to his late mother's tent. Which just the way things were done at the time. They were done for pragmatic reasons, not romantic reasons.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. I saw Karen Fitzgerald waving your hand, and then Dabi Linnick. I'm sorry for butchering everybody's name.
Okay, I love your analysis on encountering another and how we show up. I work a lot with the homeless, and how we encounter the homeless is very important. How we show up, accepting where they're at, and following the path that you suggested about self-reflection, confidence, partnership, indeed. And in that encounter, the other might grow and improve as well. Thank you. That's accepting the stranger, welcoming the stranger.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I really appreciate it.
I can't help but taking this a little bit into what you've said, into the spiritual realm. And I was thinking particularly in tefillah. What you said, you know, we are in a partnership with, it is in all relationships, you know, to have that relationship of being you know, I don't think you can hear me. My internet is unstable. You can hear me? Okay, yeah. I'm getting this message of my internet unstable. And I was thinking, you know, particularly, you know, of Buber's I-thou relationship. You know, that, and it becomes very important in all relationships, what you were saying. And I just wanted to take it a little bit, one step further to the spiritual realm too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Joel Batalski, I think you were raising your hand before. Is that correct? Yes? Awesome. And then Steve, we'll go to you afterwards.
Rabbi, I think we look at these things both literally and spiritually. I think if you look at spiritually, you say to yourself, how does the guy who wrote this, if God wrote it or who wrote this stuff, how did he look at this and what was his purpose? Now, do we look at this as two human beings, Rebecca and Isaac? Or should we look at it as two souls who have come together and have met? And this spiritual flame in them brought these two people together. And I think same thing with a marriage. When you looked at your wife, did you see her soul or did you just look at her person? Did you dive into her soul?
God only knows. I hope so.
Did she look into your soul?
She always looks into my soul. Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel. And Steve, we'll give you Steve and then Cheryl. We'll call that a day.
Okay. So this is really a little bit off topic, but when you began, I just remember reading something, and I just checked it out before you called on me. But there were several apps and dating sites with camel calculators to find out the worth of your prospective partner. So I thought that was intriguing, and they assign a value to a camel and what makes you worthy. So it's just a correlation to what you were saying earlier about, you know, how you treat your camel and everything else. So I just thought that was very interesting. And as going on, you see that many dating sites have camel calculators. So I just wanted to add that.
Great, thank you so much, Steve. And Cheryl, we'll give you the last word.
It's always kind of bothered me that the title of this portion is Chayei Sarah, Lives of Sarah, when it's actually about Sarah's death, and then she's gone. And I know that the title of the Parshayot are based on the first couple of words for the most part. But actually kind of came to me as we're talking about this, that in a way what this is about is the generations of Sarah. Because a lot of times the the Parsha will have, lines in it saying, these are the generations of Moses, or these are the generations of Abraham, or these are the generations of whoever. And we never have it listed as these are the generations of Sarah or Rebecca or whoever. But it's kind of like this, these are the generations of Sarah, because we're going into the next generation, and from there we go on from there.
Yeah, I'm glad that you added that. I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on certainly this week with the commemoration is the ways that we can celebrate the lives of the people we've lost, and perhaps in some way, right, we're learning about the people that Sarah influenced, right, the way that they lived in Sarah's memory, the way that her life continues by the way of us remembering her in that way, and the sort of read of making this about her generations, the ways that she impacted the stories that came after her. Thank you for adding that. We'll conclude with just my gratitude. Thank you for learning with me today, and I hope you have a wonderful Shabbat and that you learn some great Torah. And I guess you won't see me, but we'll see you next week with My Jewish Learning.